Greetings, everyone. My name is Emily Louie, and on behalf of Campbell Company, I would like to welcome you to Independent Schools and COVID-19, sharing challenges, successes, and advice. We want to thank you all for joining us today and hope we can provide some relief during this difficult time. Before we begin today's presentation, I'd like to quickly go through some logistics for those of you who may be new to our webinars. First, please close any programs other than GoToWebinar that are running on your computer. Next, we recommend calling in with a telephone instead of using your computer speakers. And if you do experience any visual issues, please send a chat to Campbell Company or contact GoToWebinar at the number on your screen. Today's webinar is being recorded and will last 60 minutes. Within the next 24 hours, you will receive an email from GoToWebinar that includes information on how to access the recording. We do welcome questions throughout the webinar, so please use the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel that should be on the right side of your computer screen. We will also hold time at the end of the webinar for Q&A. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our presenters today, Executive Vice President Julie McGuire, Senior Consultant Erin Culbertson, and Senior Consultant Shoshana Grammer.
Hi, thank you so much for being with us today. My colleagues and I are looking forward to having this conversation with you. My name is Julia McGuire. I'm based in the Chicago area. I have lived and worked for Campbell Company out in the San Francisco Bay Area. I've been with the firm 20 years and in fundraising for 28 years and done a great deal of work in the independent school industry. So I hope that we can be helpful today.
Right. Hi, I'm Shoshana Grammer, and I'm located in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I actually attended an independent school in Cleveland, Ohio, as a result of philanthropy. I was a financial aid student. My children attended independent school as a result of philanthropy through tuition, remission, and the annual fund. So I have great gratitude to what philanthropy did for my family. I was an executive director of director of development at an independent school in Southern California for 8 years, and I was a Campbell Company client. And when I decided I wanted to go back to consulting, I was fortunate enough to get this position here in the Bay Area. I work quite a bit with independent schools. I've been here 6 years, still learning, and I'm really eager to hear your own experiences today. Thank you for joining.
And I am Erin Culbertson. I'm a senior consultant with Campbell Company, and I've been working in the fundraising industry for over 15 years in education, primarily higher ed and independent schools. Prior to joining Campbell Company, I was a director of development and campaign director for an independent school here in Seattle, Washington for 5 years. And prior to that, worked in a university setting as a major gift officer and a prospect researcher. And we're really, thank you so much for your precious time today, and really looking forward to this conversation and lifting up the work that all of you do for your schools.
I'll just go over the agenda. We're going to look back at learnings from other challenging times, although this certainly is a very unique time. But we can still think back on what we've learned previously. We want to talk about what we've been hearing from the independent school sector and strategies we think that will be helpful that you can use during the current environment, and certainly the Q&A, which is the most important part of this webinar today. As we start on the learnings from other challenging times, I think the first learning that's not necessarily a bullet, but that I want to share is to give each other and ourselves all some grace. You may be parents as well as people who work at an independent school, as well as taking care of your parents. We are all adjusting to having our lives shifted in immeasurable ways. And so have grace with us on this call as we're working with new technology, have grace with each other. And in that sense as well, I do want to wish Erin a very happy birthday as she's doing this webinar on her actual birthday. During these challenging times, donors will not stop giving, but they may think about what their organizations are their priorities, and they may try to focus in on their top 2 or 3. And that can be very important that you remain one of those top 2 or 3. And we're talking really about those moments, the dot-com crash in 95, 9/11 in 2001, and then the Great Recession that started in 2007, 8. They most likely during these times take longer to make decisions about significant gifts, especially those that are backed by accumulated wealth in the markets. The markets are so unknown right now. We're certainly still up from where we were in 2016, but people just don't know what the future holds, and that will probably mean they'll need to take some time to make their decisions. What is interesting is about 95% of the campaigns that we did work on in the 2008-2010 timeframe during that Great Recession met or exceeded their goals. So the cultivation of their donors, the continued communication with their donors, sometimes they had to elongate their timeline and come up with creative ways for their donors to make and pay their pledges in terms of extending the pledge timelines and payments, or some created balloon pledge payments. But all of that was about a donor-centered and relationship between the organization and the donors. And so those organizations that stay in close touch, especially with your major donors and your mid-level donors, will do so much better than those that don't. If you choose not to be in contact, I can assure you somebody else will step in and fill that void for you. And particularly in times like this, since donor retention is arguably the single most important strategy for long-term fundraising success, staying in touch is really important. Being there to hear about what your donors are feeling right now is very important. So we want to encourage you to continue to have those conversations with them. I remember a woman one time, they didn't want to talk to her because her husband had lost his job, and they didn't want to bother them. And the takeaway for her was that they didn't care about us during that moment in time, so we're not going to care about them now that we're back on our feet. So try to just be there for your donors, have conversations, don't presume, just let them know you're there for them. What we're hearing from independent schools, there's a lot of pressure right now on everyone, on heads of school, faculty and staff. You guys are pivoting to this new way of teaching and interacting with students and family, trying to keep that community that's so important to independent schools viable and alive through different modalities at this point in time. Certainly there's differences in the experience depending on how old kids are. The experience for both the child and a parent of a kindergartner is much different for a child in 6th, 7th grade or high school. There's also a difference in how a child learns, and that's going to impact no matter what age they are. So that may contribute to the bandwidth of parents to engage in conversations. It may mean they need more outreach to help and support them during that time. It may mean that they are able to have more time. I happen to have a daughter who's downstairs e-learning at this very moment, who wakes up and schedules her day, and I do not see her from her normal school days because she likes that structure, and she is at school, and I am not allowed to bother her while she's at school because I wouldn't if she were really at school. So everyone has different capabilities and times. There are sensitivities to reaching out to your donor school community because of these different experiences, but don't presume that we know what they are. Just go there with an open heart, open mind, open conversation, and be there to hear. The COVID-19 crisis landed directly during the season for sending invitations for next year's and likely when families are making re-enrollment decisions. There may be concerns beyond philanthropy, concerns about enrollment for incoming students in fall of 2020, but I do have a client where actually they're having an uptick. It's a small school in a very competitive community, and the fact that there's any fear of this happening again, people are shifting to this smaller school where they feel that their children, if they are in remote learning, might get more one-on-one attention. So again, it's different for each individual, each family, and each school. We've heard a lot of questions, which we'll address in a little bit about fundraising for the annual fund. But certainly we recommend that if the annual fund is important, it's part of your business model. So let's not show people that it's just a nice to have by skipping. We're hearing about concerns about follow-up on pledge payments that were pledged early in the year and are due by May or June. So we'll talk about that. And of course, we've had to postpone, move online, or otherwise shift spring fundraising events with all of this happening. And there's some boarding schools. I don't know if we have any boarding school folks on the call today, but they are facing all of these challenges and also different challenges financially, especially if students went home from school. They might have lost the revenue of room and board. They have different facilities. International students may not have been able to go home. So there's a whole nother level of logistics there that have come into play on top of all of the ones that we already mentioned. I'll turn it over to Erin.
You're on mute, Erin. Erin.
Thank you, colleagues. Before we move on into talking about strategies that we're seeing and that we're counseling, it's important to take stock of your specific situation. Each school is in a different moment in their annual cycle, and it's important to really understand as you're making a pivot, what was the plan, where are you in the plan, and then you can evaluate how to best pivot toward those goals and needs that you have. So, have you met your fundraising goals before the crisis? Do you need new commitments before June 30th? Some schools have met those commitments. Others are still actively fundraising to achieve goals. Those are different goals to have and different pivots to make. Do you need to send pledge payments, as Julia mentioned, or not? Are those pledges paid, or is the springtime a time that you need to follow up with pledge payments? Really know where you are in that cash flow part of your year planning. And it's more important than ever to really take stock and understand what communications are going out to parents. That's always important, but right now, as families and schools are moving to remote learning, to distance learning, there's a lot of communications about the program, how to log in, where to log in, when classes are taking place. Understand the communication flow of the program side of your school so that you can see opportunities to dovetail with that, to stand clear for a few days when important messages are happening, and where you have opportunities to message with that community around philanthropy. And it's also important to understand when financial messages are going out to families. Tuition payments may be coming due. They might be on a monthly cycle, some families, quarterly, semester, or annual. Really understand when those messages are going out, and work closely with your finance office around that and understanding that timeline, and any adjustments to that timeline. Are they making adjustments? Speak with your colleagues and understand that landscape. And then it's also an important time to take stock of what emerging needs your school may have. Are there additional financial aid needs? Is the school providing technology to students and families, be that internet access or hardware to those families so that they connect? Are those costs that were unexpected? Those may be needs that your school has, and also opportunities for active fundraising or for reinforcement of annual fund messages around unrestricted funds. So think about those opportunities and really know that landscape. And also, as you look at your current situation, look to your resources. What resources did you plan to have this spring available to you, and what resources do you have now? And that includes your own personal capacity, the capacity of your team, the capacity of volunteers. Some people may have more capacity to help and lean in. Others may need to pull back because of what they're facing at home or in their quarantine environments. So really take stock of that, and that will help you make this pivot and identify strategies that will work for you. So I'll turn it over to Shoshana here to talk about some of those strategies.
Great, thanks. So we talked a lot about how you think about your own situation and how you can come up with strategies for your own school and the current environment we're in. And so we taking what we heard from the field and our work with schools, our own experience, I've been in fundraising for 30 plus years. I lived through all this, and I truly believe things not as horrible as this, but I've worked through emergencies, and I do want to give you the comfort to know you do come out at the other end, and you can even come out stronger as an organization and a team if you use this time, as we're calling it, kind of a gift of time. We've not had this before, but this could be the time that you really could think through how you want to respond to this emergency situation and how you could build for the future. So we'll talk about that for a few minutes. We heard from a lot of you that, it's April and we still need commitments by June 30th to stay strong, as we mentioned before. So we are suggesting, as we mentioned earlier, to talk to your donors. Call them, see how they're doing, have that empathetic ear to them. Many of them are running businesses and homeschooling their own children, caring for their parents who may be near or far, certainly not able to see them every day and check in on them. Learners are very different. So have that empathetic ear to them, see how they're doing. Find out from your administration how you should be taking that information back to the school, because you want to be able to say to the donor, thank you for sharing. If it's all right with you, I'm going to share that with our senior leadership. Is your senior leadership ready to hear this now and pivot accordingly, or do you want to collect that? So, but you want your donors to know that you are hearing them, you're listening, and you're doing something with what you hear. And I have to tell you, from the schools we've talked to and their check-ins, by and large, you're hearing joyful things. You are hearing messages of gratitude. You are hearing just how fortunate they feel to be in your communities that pivoted quickly and went to distance learning. So it's a validation of how great your community is. And that's, of course, an emerging theme that we're seeing. But we do know that people, you're not there to open the mail at the school, right? So when you're talking to people, maybe be creative about ways that they can make their donation. They can hit a button on your website. They can send it in digitally. So, that's important to realize. Maybe people, like Erin said, maybe at this point they want to send up monthly recurring donations on their credit card. It's hard to get through to the banks if you don't already have that set up. You could do it manually. Yeah, instead of sending me $1,000, if you want to send me 4 payments of $250, great. Some people may want to go on pause. Be ready for that. They didn't give up on you. Just right now, they're not willing to make a donation. We would like to suggest that when you have these conversations, and we suggest in the best of times, you have a relationship handbook that's on your computer. So everybody has the same playbook. And so if you don't have that right now, we suggest you do that. Even if it's telling everyone in your department, this is what we're doing with donations. If you can't get into everyone remotely into your database, because God forbid you get sick or you're caring for someone who's sick. Somebody's got to pick up the ball. So we hope that there's cross-training and you're creative in the ways that you can meet the needs of your school. And that's the message to tell people. Inevitably, they'll say, well, what's going on at school? And you could say, we're working on the annual fund, still as important today as it always has been. And this is the reason this year now, right now, we need all our commitments in. So we find that that's something that's on your mind. Some of you have met your goals and you're in stewardship, which is awesome. So what can we do in the time? Again, the gift of time. Perhaps you focus on prospect research. We always say we want to do it, and there never seems to be enough time. So perhaps this is the time where you see that you have good emails for everyone. That's how you're connecting with many people. You could look at their LinkedIn. It's a great time to find out where people are currently working. Sometimes in schools, we get an application at the beginning the student's journey, and it asks, where does mom and dad or partners work? Where do grandparents live? And we don't update that, right? The emergency contact list might be updated with a phone number, but inevitably people change jobs and have titles. So this is a time where you can perhaps update that information. Planning for next year, it's a great time to start collecting those stories about how you reacted, maybe update your case for support for next year. Perhaps it's a time to recruit your parent association volunteers who will help you, or your annual fund volunteers in the classroom. And it's a really great time to steward your entire school community. Find out ways that you can share the story, and we'll talk more about that as we go on. We heard about events that were canceled. Some are postponed to the fall. Some are just not going to happen this year at all. So we are encouraging people to, we ask them, well, what's important about your event? Is it to get your message out? Is it to raise money for financial aid? And inevitably, people said it's a time where a community gets together. It's really a sense of community. It's a way to celebrate another great school year. So how can you do that virtually? Think about what you wanted to get done. And we've seen some really creative things. If you were going to honor someone and do a video, we have talked through our clients about not just having, as you would in a ballroom, where that video of that honored person comes to you, but maybe in your own homes, you can make short videos about what they meant to your community and send it to each other. You can share what that honoree meant to each other. You can talk about having people who would normally ask others to sit at their table to still be a virtual supporter of that. And if everyone chipped in, maybe you could provide scholarship to somebody. Maybe you can have a reason to bring friends together in support. So we are sharing ideas. Would love to hear from you during the Q&A time as well. Alumni reunions happen this time of year. Is there a way that you can consider doing a virtual event with your alumni? Could you, instead of having a huge alumni event, could you break it down into decades? Instead of just the years of 5 and 0 or 6 and 1 or whatever it is that you were, this year's 5 and 0, of course. But could you do it in decades? And we have found in working with schools that sometimes those work out really well, because you can have the child of that year and the parents. Because oftentimes in independent schools, parents made their lifelong friends at that independent school. When I know it happened with my kids, probably happened with Maddie and for Julia, those parents that you met through that school have mirrored values with you. They were with you when your children made friends, and you miss those friends when they graduate. I say to my kids, so how's so-and-so? They're okay. They're doing fine. They're living in New York. I miss those kids were in my living room for 10 years. I would love to see them again. I'd love to see those parents. We could do that virtually. And that's another way to get those alumni families and alumni connected, especially if mom says, I'm going to be at that reunion. You're coming, right? You're coming, aren't you? Yes, I am coming to that reunion. And so how also are you working to ramp up digital communications? Sometimes you only hear from advancement in your digital communications when it's annual fun time or it's spring event time. We would suggest that maybe this is a time when, based on other communications that are happening, you can get messages out there. I just got a beautiful message from my high school. They have the word of the day, and they had a 5-year-old with his dad doing a video of the word of the day, and it was the most adorable thing. And it came out from the advancement office. Now, I know why the advancement office sent it, but everyone else just probably thought it was from the school. But it made me think, oh, that child's at home. He's having a moment with his father. And I want to support the school and what they're doing with distance learning. It just melted my heart. Adjust your social media plans as you're going. We'll talk more about that. But how can you really advance your fundraising message using social media and everybody else that's with you to expand what you're doing and get the message out, especially as you're trying to get some lost income that you may have had this year, and you want to talk about how the school's responding digitally. Next slide, please. We always talk about, the endowment, as it's there to weather the storm. We're in the storm, right? This is the reason you want a strong endowment. If people are coming to you for increased financial aid next year because of what happened, you may need to rely on the endowment. People who are coming to you for financial aid for the first time, you may see that you need technology infrastructure. I know that most of us are on overload with technology, and if your school didn't build in the hardware to be able to support something like this, or teacher training, this might be the time, and you want to do that on a sustainable level. So this is a great time to think about how you can build up your endowment. Support for the teachers, support for the schools, professional and endowment for the teachers to get development and support them. So some people are saying, oh, we don't want to talk about endowment, that's long term, we want the here and now. For some people, especially those people who don't perhaps have children right now at the school, alumni, parents of alumni, this may be a wonderful time to have conversations about the importance of endowment. And we would encourage you to not forget that during this time. The other strategies for navigating is holding virtual meetings. The committees can continue to meet. You may find that your advancement committee and your financial aid committees, or whatever committees you're working with, you may find that by going virtual, you find increased participation. Because now people don't have to take off work, drive to the school. It may not be convenient for them. You have more people. It's more interactive. And you can also tape it for those people who weren't there, and you can personally follow up with them afterwards. You can share materials. It's instant. Thinking about not, some people are saying we're not going to meet at all. People are looking for connection. It might be a great time to have that continuity, to continue to have that capital campaign committee meeting, have that annual fund committee, have that development committee. And lastly, we want to talk about leveraging your volunteers. You have a great group of volunteers in your school, your leadership, who are always there saying, well, tell me what you need. Well, this may be the time that you tell them what you need. They're at home. They're not traveling. You don't have to track them down on other continents, but maybe they can help, and they can do some stewardship calls, and they can just thank people for being part of the community and for their giving this year. They may be able to help you with peer-to-peer screening as you're thinking about people's annual fund donations next year, or your capital campaign or major gift campaign. You may see coming out of this that there's an opportunity for a major gift campaign. And you can also focus on qualifying and stewarding those people who are not on campus. Again, the grandparents, the parents of alumni, your alumni who may not have young children at home, depending on how old your school is, depending on if you have that information for people. And just to think about classes of alumni parents. We heard from one school where through this interaction, they were able to pull a group together of the parents of 1980 to 85 at this school. And they started talking. They had a virtual happy hour, and they decided to sponsor one student's scholarship for 1 year. So they raised $30,000, which was incredible. Now, stewarded correctly, they will do that every year, because now they're into it, and they know that the student, of course it's confidential, but it's a global student, will need 6 years of support through middle school and high school, and it's just a fun way for them to stay connected. So those are some of our ideas that we have on strategies for navigating our current situation. Again, it's unprecedented. It's a time to be creative. It's a time to take the time and gift of time and do some things differently. And we would love to hear from you all. I'll turn it over now. What experience or stories do you have to share? What questions do you have? Our presenter will help navigate this for us.
Great. Thank you all so much. As Shoshana mentioned, we'll now be taking audience questions, so please send those through the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel, and please share your experiences with us. Okay, so let's get started. Our first question is, our organization raises funds through traditional events and direct solicitation. Our audience has not shown itself to be conducive to virtual or P2P fundraising. What would you suggest to do in lieu of events?
I can jump in there. I think that's a really great question. And one of the most important things I hear in that question is that the person asking the question knows their audience. And I think that's really important, especially right now, to really think about your audience. You know, it's great to come up with your own plans or your own ideas and then to push that out. But now perhaps more than ever, we really need to understand how is our audience actually going to plug in with our outreach. And so I would say start with your goal. If your goal is to raise funds and you know that digital or one-to-one outreach from peers isn't a way that your audience has responded, I would look at the resources that you have of your own time. And reach out perhaps via phone if email or other digital means are more difficult. And even if your audience hasn't responded to that in the past, I wouldn't rule out that they might respond to it now. These are different times, and you are making outreach, and people are, I think, hungry for connection. And so if you're reaching out in good faith and with a desire to connect and share the message from your school, I think you might find that you have more response to that than maybe you've had in the past. I know I myself am answering unknown numbers in a different way right now on my phone because I don't know who it might be. It might be someone for work that I had planned to connect with and I just don't know their phone number. I might be feeling a desire to connect, and so I'm answering and saying, oh, a person's reaching out. Who is it? I had a great conversation with my alma mater in that spirit. It was an unknown number. I think the person was calling from their own cell phone number, and I don't know that I would have necessarily answered that phone call during a busy work day prior to this moment in the same way. And it was a really, really lovely connection, and I learned a lot about what the school is doing, and I appreciated that outreach.
That's a great response, Erin. I would just answer along Erin's response. These are different times. I would kind of test it with some of the people that are closest to you. Speak to those who have been adverse to it before, and tell them why this may be the only way to reach people this time around, and they may be open to it. So start with maybe some board members or some donors that you feel particularly close to. This might be the time to think about a matching gift or a challenge in your community, something that could really ignite some excitement and some momentum and get people, to rally behind something. And the only way to do it, again, is digitally, because you can't send out direct mail pieces and you're not there to open up mail at the office. So people understand the unusual circumstances right now. And I think we've seen some great uses of matching gifts right now that have been presented to organizations to get the ball rolling. So perhaps somebody in your own community would be willing to do that for you.
Great, thank you so much. We do have a few audience stories to share. The first one is a suggestion. If you are sending acknowledgement letters at this time, it's a good idea to take a look at them through the lens of this challenging time. Be sure that you don't come across tone deaf.
Yeah,
Emily, really good.
Emily, I'll just piggyback on that story because their comment was about acknowledgements, which I think is important. And I think the same is true for any pledge reminders or anything that might have happened in a little bit more of an automatic spirit. Social media that you might have pre-planned, as Shoshana mentioned, all those messages are worth review. And that's a great story about acknowledgement letters too.
I have a really cool example that I heard of, and you could do it on PowerPoint. You know how on PowerPoint you have that fade in with the letters? And so someone took a pen and did a PowerPoint where they're writing a thank you letter and the letters appear. So it looks like she's actually writing the thank you note on the screen for the donor when they open it up. So it's a personal note, but it's digital. It's right now in the moment. Just thank you for being part of our community. Your gift this year meant so much to us. And I just thought that was a wonderful way and creative way to be able to respond to the times. And you're so right about being tone deaf. We all want to be relevant. We want to show how what we're doing is relevant, and we also want to be mindful of what else is going on in their lives. So having that connection and doing it thoughtfully, so very important. Thank you for sharing that.
Great. Our next audience story is, I work with public charter schools similar to independent schools, and many of them have launched emergency response funds, which has been extremely successful. However, most had scheduled events for the spring to support the annual fund. His question actually is, what types of events are best suited to move virtual versus postponed or canceled?
That's a great question. You know, at my daughter's school and other schools I work at, she's in a grammar school, they usually do a run in the spring, right, where they do laps. And so we're still doing that this year, and we're taking videos of the kids running laps in the yard. So if you're a school that does some sort of fundraising that the kids are involved in, some sort of athletic opportunity, and in our school we raised $175,000 last year in the Glow Run, and so that can be a fun way again to connect. And then all the videos are on the site. I think auctions to some degree, depending on what the items are, right? I mean, I'm not sure every vacation package is going to go for a high amount at this point in time. But there are some good packages out there, and with all the remote bids, it's possible for folks to get on there. You can encourage grandparents who don't attend the event to come out and bid, particularly in the things that schools do so well, like children's artwork or class artwork, or those things that are so unique to an institution. And I do think that the teacher treasures that are there, that one-on-one time with your teachers, that people would be very excited to do that as well. So auction, any athletic things that can be done independently and then combined, I think we could definitely move forward with. Certainly luncheons when there's a speaker, not as easy to do. You don't get the door ticket price. But you could still share the information from that speaker in virtual ways via video, but then ask for a solicitation voluntarily versus charge a ticket price.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, do you have any recommendations on shifting fundraising focus to a mini campaign to support families that are deeply affected by the pandemic with one-time support for the next school year? Our board has approved this and knows that the economic downturn will be hurting this community for longer than others.
I think that having a mini campaign to meet the needs of your families is going to resonate with your community. People do not, they know the trauma that this is causing children, to miss their friends, to miss their teachers, to miss their everyday life. If they had to leave your school because of unknown financial need, right, that would cause, more trauma in that child's life. And I think your families would get behind trying to keep the community together and give the school the resources they need for providing financial aid for families who need it now and maybe for a few years. So I think it may be too early to know how many, the normal facts and figures that you have. We have X amount of families who are requesting X amount. I think the goodwill, the gesture, knowing that people are getting their acceptance letters now and they're making their commitments to schools. Some schools do financial aid after that admittance, and some families just haven't been in touch. They don't know what their future is. So having those funds available as emergency funds at the discretion of the head of school, I think is something you certainly can float. I think you'll find major gift support behind it. And as long as it's authentic and you're good stewards of that money, as I know you will be, I think it will really resonate with your community. And that's a wonderful way to show and illustrate the values of your school that are apparent all the time.
I would encourage you to leave that fund as flexible as possible in the sense of, yes, financial aid for attending the school, but also extracurricular. For folks who might still be able to send their child, will they be able to participate in the extracurricular that they've been accustomed to doing, to ensuring if there's transportation needs. So love the emergency fund idea. It's so important. I will share, I learn every day how much people want to help, and that you have to give them that avenue in which to help. People in this world right now are saying, how can I make a difference? I'm sitting in my home. I happen to be in a very high risk group. And I can't tell you how many people text me every day. And finally, I have to say, yes, you can drop off ice cream on my front porch, or yes, you can, drop off ramen, whatever it is, because people want to make that difference. And so in your community, you'll find that creating a fund like that, it will make people feel connected to the community, and those who can, who need to do something, and we all need to do something right now, will have the opportunity to do it. And I think it's just a fantastic idea. And for your teachers as well. So teachers might have had extracurricular things that they did that they're not getting that revenue from right now. So how can we help support our teachers in this way as well?
Great, thank you. Our next question is, are schools planning on electronic solicitation or printed solicitation during this year end, aside from one-on-one personal asks?
Yeah, that's
I think it depends on where you live. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say that's a great question, and it kind of goes back to one of the questions that we started with about knowing your audience, and in the past, there's been a desire for that direct mail physically in the envelope, and I think it really depends on your circumstances. I think a lot of communities, here I'm in Western Washington in the Seattle area. We've been under quarantine and really having a heightened community awareness of this for longer. And so our community is already at the point of thinking differently about mail and, how we're treating our physical mail or package delivery and those sorts of things. So I think we have to be mindful that some communities or individuals might not be as attentive to their physical mail, even if you send it. And then, of course, your ability to send physical mail and get things printed or the way you would have expected to would be very different. So I would just be mindful of those factors as you make that decision, and really be open-minded about leaning into digital technologies with follow-up. Email boxes do get full. We know that. So to the extent that, a one and done email, if that's what you have the capacity to do and that feels right for your organization, I wouldn't say don't do that. But I would also say if you can have a communication plan that spans a few weeks, that has different types of touch points, maybe some volunteers could be involved in following up in digital spaces where your families are hanging out, be them informal WhatsApp groups of friend groups at your school, or more formal parent association happy hours that might be happening for classrooms or grade levels or those sorts of things. Look into those opportunities as a way to echo the message that you might have sent, say, through a direct email appeal.
Great.
Thank you. So we're at our last audience question. If you do have any final questions, please share those now. This question is, we're considering using text for the first time to reach out to our community to support our stewardship and fundraising efforts. Can you offer any thoughts or suggestions on how we do this right?
Great question. Oh, please, Erin, go.
Oh, I was just going to jump in on that, and I welcome, obviously, everyone sharing on this. It's such a great question, and, when I was in the school setting, we had a lot of conversations about this because we were considering using text messaging for outreach for the first time. We hadn't done that a lot, and, there was a concern, well, some people are going to feel like that's an invasion, and other people really want that technology, or they want that communication through that platform where they really actually are, and they think of it as a service to reach them there. So I think as you're evaluating using new technologies for the first time, really start with your goal and your case, and know that when you make a decision to use a new technology, it's in good faith for your audience. You are trying to reach them. You are trying to tell your story. You are trying to express the authentic need that your school has. You are trying to share with them how these dollars are going to lift up what happens in the classroom, out of the classroom, with teachers, with students, with families. So in that way, I'm not answering directly a technical question of what is the exact right way to use a particular platform, but I think holding close that good faith spirit and that is driving your desire to reach out in these new ways is a way to be bold in these unprecedented times and try new things, and know that your audience is resilient. That even if there's a fumble, if you are holding that good faith spirit, they'll stick with you through that as you learn and refine your approach.
I was going to suggest that as you do that, following all that Erin said, I like the idea of using text on a very personal basis. So not a text blast, but text as a way to connect and say, I'm thinking about you. Would you like to connect? I'm thinking about you. Did you see the email we sent? Did you have any questions? So I have used text in this way as a follow, not as the main means of communication, but as a really personal follow-up method of communication. So it might be a way to test that and see how people respond.
Yeah.
Great. And with that, we'd like to thank you all for joining us today. We also encourage you to visit our COVID-19 resource page where you can read our advice, review resources, and schedule a free consultation with us. Within 24 hours, you'll be receiving a follow-up email from GoToWebinar with a link to the recording and resource page. In the meantime, please don't hesitate to email our presenters with any questions you have. Thank you and take care.